Hey, it's Kevin from KDW Mixing Mastering here. In my last video I did some examples of the Torpedo Studio from Two Notes and gave a bit of a run through and some sounds. This video I'm going to do that again, but I'm going to take it a little bit further, in a slightly different direction. The purpose of this one is to actually sort of show the difference between doing it the old way that I would record and some other options, and or using the torpedo. So trying to get an idea of whether the box is improving things or not, and giving some examples of that. So how I'm doing that is I'm taking the original way I record. Okay, so to give you the idea of what's happening, I've got a guitar going straight into a Line 6 Pod HD 500X that then has a digital connection to a Line 6 DT25 amplifier head, which has tubes in it, and then that is then plugged into a 4x12 cab with Celestion vintage 30s that is then mic'd up with a Shure SM57, slightly off the edge of the cone and a little bit away from the grill, but not too much, pretty close. When I run through this, I'll be playing examples of all of these sounds. I will be doing clean samples, so clean guitar, sort of a dirty style guitar, Marshall-y sound, and a high gain sound. So to make this a fair comparison, because obviously I could take the Torpedo and I could do dual mics, I could do different dual cabinets, everything, so I could make this sound easily way better. But what I wanted to do was do a direct comparison to show you the difference or not difference between them. So with the Torpedo, when I'm doing the Torpedo samples, I am setting it up to mimic the way I have it recorded with the microphone and the cabinet live. Okay, so I am setting it up as the cabinet will be a single cabinet, which is a 4x12 with vintage 30s Celestions, a Shure SM57, slightly off center and a little bit away from the cabinet. Alright, so I'm trying to mimic the exact same setup that I have here with a microphone and real cabinet. So the other thing that needs to be compared is that where I'm recording my guitars is in a place where I cannot crank the amp up really loud. Okay, because I'll drive neighbours insane and family members and anybody else around here insane. So the recording of the guitar with the mic and the cabinet is set at the level that I would normally do it, that I can do it. And then to mimic that, I will then do the samples of the Torpedo with the amp at that same level. But then on top of that, I will also then give you some samples with me cranking the amp up. So normally when I'm recording, I have the amp at about a quarter volume only. So I will be doing the Torpedo with it set at the quarter level volume as well to give a direct comparison. But then on top of that, just to give an idea, I will then also be doing samples of it recorded at a volume of halfway and a volume at about 75%. I'm not bothering with 100% because that's just pointless with the amp. It's just pushing it beyond any point. 75% is going to give you exactly what you need at most, if not 50%. Now the other things I'll be testing is that there's different ways to configure this. So I will also be showing samples of the Torpedo with it connected using analog cables. I'm calling analog cables. So analog into microphone inputs on my UAD Apollo, but the other way you can connect it up is with a digital SP-Diff cable, so I'll be doing samples of that as well to see if there's any difference there. Now just to take it even further, because I also have the Line 6 DT25 and the Line 6 Pod HD 500X, both of those have also got outputs and they have their own cabinet and microphone simulators. So when I'm recording through the real speaker cabinet with the real microphone, all of the settings on the Line 6 are set to Pod 500X is set to be a preamp only, because the DT25 is the power amp, and there is no cabinet simulation and no microphone simulation on the presets that I'm using. When I'm going through the Torpedo, is exactly the same setting, because the Pod 500X is still the preamp only, the DT25 is still the power amp, and then the Torpedo is doing the cab and amp microphone simulation. So then, to take it even further, what I decided to do was I would take a direct out from the back of the DT25. Okay, so I'm doing a sample of that, which is going straight to the UAD, not through the Torpedo. So I'm going to compare that sound. So when I use the direct out of the DT25, the Pod 500X is still set to preamp only. The DT25 is the power amp, but it is then applying a cabinet simulation and a microphone simulation. And again, I'm setting them to the exact same setting. So I'm setting the cabinet to simulate a 4x12 with Celestion Vintage 30s, and a microphone to simulate an SM57. Now with the Pod 500X and the DT25, I don't have the luxury of being able to move the microphone around. It is just what it is. So then I'll also be doing a sample of the Pod 500X direct out of it going into the UAD Apollo. So when I'm doing that, we've obviously bypassed the DT25 power amp. So then what I've got is obviously the Pod 500X then is simulating the preamp plus the power amp plus the cabinet and the microphone. Then on top of that, there's another sample, if you can't get enough, there's another sample where I do a direct out from the DT25, but instead of going into the UAD, I go into the Torpedo. And in that case, when I go into the Torpedo, the Pod 500X is doing the preamp only, the DT25 is the power amp, but again, the cabinet and microphone is not turned on the line 6 stuff, and is being done by the Torpedo. So when I'm saying direct out of the DT25 or direct out of the Pod 500X, I'm talking about an XLR connection out. The main way to connect the DT25 to the Torpedo is using the speaker cable that you would normally plug into your speaker cabinet into the Torpedo, and the Torpedo is acting as a load box. But the other way to do it, which is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a direct out, is that I can take an XLR cable out of the back of the DT25 and plug it direct into the UAD Apollo or direct into the Torpedo. And then the same with the Pod 500X. So another sample is the Pod 500X taking a direct XLR cable out to the Torpedo. And again, in that case, what is happening is the Line 6 500X, HD 500X is doing the preamp plus the power amp, but is not doing a cabinet or mic simulation. The Torpedo is doing the mic and cabinet simulation. So they're all the samples that I've got, and as I said, there is going to be different volume levels where the amp is set at 25%, then at 50%, and then at 75%. Now, I haven't done the 50% or 75% on the real cabinet with the real mic because it's not possible for me to do that in this environment, and because I can't do it that way anyway, it's not really a valuable test for me to do. So the point of this exercise is to prove what I can do today with a real microphone and speaker and compare it to an exact match using the other settings or simulating what I now can do with the Torpedo by being able to push the amp harder but play silently. So as the samples are being played, I will put text on the screen, and there should be some photos popping up through this video showing the settings and things like that, and I will be putting text on with the samples so that you can see what is appearing at each time. I'll be switching backwards and forwards through various settings to try and give you a good idea of the comparisons direct between each other. So hopefully it gives you a good representation. There's definitely some massive differences between the sounds. Like I said, I could get the torpedo to sound way more better than this if I customized and used dual cabs and everything else, but that's not the point of this exercise. The point of the exercise was I was trying to compare, as close as possible, match one for one. So here we go. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video after you've listened to these samples.